The bomber lurches. Lieutenant Thomas Reardon feels the concussion before he hears it. A pressure wave that compresses his chest cavity, followed by the distinctive crack whump of an 88mm shell detonating 60 feet below his B-17's belly. Another black flower blooms to starboard. Then another. The flak field is tightening around his formation like a noose made of iron and mathematics. At 22,000 feet over Schweinfurt, Germany, the air temperature sits at 52 degrees below zero. Reardon's breath crystallizes on his oxygen mask, but that's not what makes his hands shake on the control yoke. It's the shells. Each one weighs 20 pounds. Each climbs toward him at 840 meters per second, faster than sound itself. Each contains enough explosive to fragment into 1,500 jagged steel shards, each shard capable of severing a control cable, puncturing a fuel tank, or opening an artery. The German gunners 5 miles below don't need to hit him directly. They just need to get close. The bombardier's voice crackles in his headset. Bomb bay doors open. The formation tightens. 23 B-17s flying wingtip to wingtip, each one carrying 10 men and 4,000 pounds of high explosive toward a ball-bearing factory that keeps the Wehrmacht's tanks rolling. The flak intensifies. Shell bursts walk through the formation like an invisible giant's footsteps, searching. Then Reardon sees it. The B-17 ahead of him, Lucky Lady, piloted by his academy classmate Jake Morrison, takes a direct hit. The shell punches through the fuselage just aft of the bomb bay. For one frozen moment, nothing happens. Then the aircraft's left wing folds upward at an impossible angle, shears completely off, and tumbles over the tail. The fuselage, still containing 9 men who were alive 3 seconds ago, enters a vertical dive, trailing fire. Reardon forces himself to look away, forces himself to hold formation, forces himself to fly straight through the steel storm because that's what the mission requires. But in the corner of his vision, he counts. 1, 2, 3. No parachutes. The gun that killed Lucky Lady was German. It was designed in Sweden to circumvent a treaty. It was called the 8-8, the 8-8, and it could reach altitudes that should have been impossible. American bomber doctrine assumed safety at 20,000 feet. German engineering had other ideas. This is the story of why they were wrong. November 1918. The Treaty of Versailles forbids Germany from developing new artillery systems. German engineers at Krupp don't stop working, they just move. To Sweden, to the Bofors works in Karlskoga, where international law can't touch them, and where Swedish engineering expertise can accelerate development. The goal? Create an anti-aircraft gun capable of reaching the stratosphere. The problem? Existing designs top out at 15,000 feet. Aircraft are already flying higher. Future bombers will climb even further. Germany needs a gun that can kill at altitudes where the air is too thin to breathe, where temperatures plunge to Antarctic extremes, where standard artillery trajectories fail because gravity and drag behave differently. The Krupp team considers calibers. 75mm? Too small. The shell wouldn't retain enough energy at extreme altitude. 120mm? Too heavy. Impossible to traverse fast enough to track aircraft. They settle on 88mm, the same caliber the Imperial Navy used on its surface vessels. Large enough for lethality, light enough for mobility. By 1928, the prototype Flak 18 fires its first rounds. Muzzle velocity, 840 meters per second. Maximum ceiling, nearly 33,000 feet. Rate of fire with a trained 11-man crew, 15 to 20 rounds per minute. The gun weighs 7 tons complete, splits into components for transport, and can be operational in 2.5 minutes from arrival. It's a marvel of mechanical engineering, a weapon that can pivot 360 degrees on its cruciform base, elevate from -3 to +85 degrees, and deliver high explosive fragmentation shells into the flight path of aircraft, traveling at speeds approaching 300 miles per hour. And it's completely illegal. Adolf Hitler takes power in 1933. The Versailles restrictions evaporate. Production begins in earnest. When the Spanish Civil War erupts in 1936, Germany's Condor Legion deploys batteries of 88s to support Franco's nationalists. The gun proves devastatingly effective, not just against Republican aircraft but against ground targets, bunkers, tanks, fortified positions. The Wehrmacht takes notes. By September 1939, Germany possesses over 2,500 Flak 18, 36, and 37 guns. Most are concentrated around major cities and industrial centers. The Luftwaffe controls the majority, organizing them into Flak regiments of 24 guns each. Wehrmacht units receive mixed anti-aircraft battalions with 4 to 8 guns. Every battery includes a Commando Grade 40, a fire control computer combining a 4-meter optical rangefinder with mechanical calculators that transmit targeting data directly to gun crews. The system can predict where a bomber will be in 30 seconds and place a shell there with terrifying accuracy. American planners study intelligence reports. They conclude that altitude provides safety. Fly above 20,000 feet, the doctrine states, and anti-aircraft fire becomes ineffective. Statistical noise. Acceptable losses. They're about to discover how wrong they are. The engineering problem seems impossible. An aircraft at 25,000 feet travels at 250 miles per hour. The shell must climb 5 miles vertically, while the target moves horizontally at over 350 feet per second. Wind alters the trajectory. Temperature affects the explosive timing. Barometric pressure changes the detonation altitude. And the gunners must calculate all of this in real time, while enemy bombs fall toward their positions. Krupp's solution involves 3 interlocking systems. First, the gun itself. The barrel measures 4.9 meters long, 56 times the 88mm bore diameter. This extreme length-to-caliber ratio generates the muzzle velocity necessary for altitude. The semi-automatic breech mechanism ejects spent casings automatically, cocking itself for the next round. Trained crews achieve a sustained rhythm. Load, aim, fire, eject. 15 seconds between shells. 4 shells in the air simultaneously, each on a different ballistic arc. The shells present their own challenges. Engineers design a unitary cartridge, propellant and projectile combined, weighing 15 kilograms complete. The high-explosive warhead contains 870 grams of TNT. A time fuse in the nose can be set to detonate anywhere from 0 to 30 seconds of flight. When the shell explodes, the casing fragments into over 1,500 steel shards, each one moving at supersonic velocity. The kill radius, 200 yards in 3 dimensions. A single well-placed burst can cripple multiple aircraft. But fuse setting proves problematic. Early Flak 18 models require crews to manually adjust each fuse using a special key. Too slow. Combat demands speed. The Flak 36 introduces a semi-automatic fuse setter mounted on the left side of the gun. The crew inserts the shell nose first into a cup. The device automatically adjusts the time delay based on data transmitted from the fire control unit. Total time, 3 seconds. The Flak 37 integrates the setter directly into the loading tray, shaving another second off the cycle. The Commando Durette 40 represents the system's brain. 5 operators work the fire control computer. 1 tracks the target through the optical rangefinder, measuring distance. 2 others input altitude estimates, airspeed calculations, and wind corrections into mechanical calculators. The computer solves differential equations in real time, predicting future target position. This data flows electrically to gun positions via underground cables. Each gun receives elevation and azimuth settings directly. The gunners don't aim. They simply match their indicators to the transmitted numbers and fire. Accuracy improves with practice. A single battery fires test patterns at towed sleeve targets. Hit rates climb from 5% to 20%. 4 batteries coordinating through a central commando durette achieve 30% hit rates against aircraft, flying straight and level. Against massed bomber formations, dozens of targets in a concentrated space, the mathematics shift dramatically. The gunners don't target individual aircraft. They target the airspace the formation must fly through. What happens next becomes pure statistics in steel. June 1941. Halfaya Pass, Libya. 13 88mm guns dug into defensive positions along the Egypt-Libya border. The crews belong to the Flak Battalion of Rommel's 15th Panzer Division. Their orders: stop the British tank assault. At 0600 hours, 190 British tanks advance across the desert. The British commanders expect anti-tank guns, small caliber, 37mm, maybe 50mm at most. They faced these before. Frontal armor on the Matilda II measures 78mm, thick enough to deflect standard anti-tank rounds at combat ranges. The plan is straightforward. Close distance, overwhelm the German positions with superior numbers, break through. The first 88mm armor-piercing shell strikes a Matilda at 1,800 meters. The shell, moving at 810 meters per second, punches completely through the front glacis plate, traverses the crew compartment, and exits through the rear hull in a shower of spalling and flame. The tank stops moving. Smoke pours from every hatch. The crew doesn't evacuate because there's no crew left to evacuate. 5 more Matildas die in the next 90 seconds. The British formation breaks. Tanks scatter, seeking cover in terrain that offers none. The 88s traverse smoothly on their cruciform mounts, tracking new targets. German gunners claim 1 kill for every 20 rounds fired, a kill ratio that shouldn't be possible with towed artillery against moving armor. But the 88 isn't standard artillery. The muzzle velocity gives it a flat trajectory. The telescopic Zielfernrohr 20 sight provides 4 times magnification with a 17-degree field of view. At 1 kilometer, the gunner sees a target 308 meters wide in perfect clarity. By day's end, 100 British tanks lie burning in the desert. 13 guns, 100 tanks. The mathematics are devastating. But North Africa is just the proving ground. August 1943. The bomber offensive shifts to Germany itself. 8th Air Force B-17 flying fortresses penetrate deep into the Reich, targeting industrial centers. The bombers fly at altitudes between 22,000 and 27,000 feet, higher than most fighters can easily reach, high enough that the crews believe they're safe from ground fire. The first 88mm shell explodes in the middle of a B-17 formation over Bremen. The bomber crews see a small red flash followed by expanding black smoke. The explosion itself is silent at first. Sound travels slowly at that altitude. Then the pressure wave hits. Metal fragments scythe through aluminum skin. A shard the size of a playing card severs a control cable in one bomber. Another fragment punctures a fuel tank, spraying high-octane gasoline into sub-zero air where it instantly vaporizes, creating a flammable mist. A third shard, no bigger than a coin, strikes a crewman in the throat, severing his carotid artery. He bleeds out in 40 seconds while his crewmates watch, helpless. The formation's lead bombardier reports, "Flak accurate and heavy." His voice is steady, professional. But his hands shake badly enough that he can't operate the Norden bomb site. Welcome to the new reality. The numbers don't lie. October 14, 1943. Mission to Schweinfurt. 291 B-17 flying fortresses attack ball-bearing factories deep in Germany. 60 are shot down by a combination of fighters and flak. 17 more crash on landing or are scrapped due to damage. 77 aircraft lost. 650 airmen don't return. Only 33 bombers land without damage. The 8th Air Force suspends deep penetration raids. American bomber doctrine collapses under German fire. The theory that massed formations of heavily armed B-17s can defend themselves against fighters and that altitude provides protection from ground fire proves catastrophically wrong. The 88mm flak batteries are too accurate, too numerous, and too well coordinated. British commanders calculate that flying against 488 batteries means accepting a 12% loss rate per mission. For bomber crews, the mathematics are simple and brutal. A standard tour of duty requires 25 missions. If each mission carries a 12% loss rate, the cumulative probability of survival drops below 50% after 15 missions. The crews know this. They calculate it in their bunks. They whisper it in briefing rooms. They watch the empty chairs in mess halls multiply. The strategic implications ripple outward. Germany concentrates 88mm batteries around critical targets. Schweinfurt's ball-bearing plants receive protection from 96 guns arranged in overlapping fields of fire. The synthetic oil refineries at Leuna are defended by 120 guns. Each battery of 4 guns connects via cable to a central fire control station. The stations coordinate timing so that shells from different batteries detonate simultaneously. creating layered kill zones. A bomber formation approaching Schweinfurt must fly through 5 separate flak belts, each one denser than the last. Mission planners respond by altering altitudes. Pre-war doctrine called for bombing runs at 15,000 to 20,000 feet for maximum accuracy. The 88s force bombers higher, 25,000 to 27,000 feet minimum. This reduces bombing accuracy by more than half. A bomb site calibrated for 20,000 feet becomes significantly less precise at 27,000 feet. Wind drift increases. Visibility decreases. Target identification becomes problematic, but the higher altitude improves survival rates. At 27,000 feet, bombers fly near the 88's maximum effective ceiling. The shells reach them with reduced velocity. Fragmentation patterns spread wider, decreasing lethality per shell. But reduced lethality still means death. The gun can still kill at 30,000 feet if the timing is perfect. Production becomes a race. Germany manufactures approximately 21,000 88mm flak guns between 1933 and 1945. Krupp, Skoda, and other contractors operate around the clock. The United States responds by increasing B-17 production to 16 aircraft per day. Boeing, Douglas, and Vega collectively build 12,630 flying fortresses. Britain contributes Lancaster and Halifax bombers to the night offensive. The sky becomes an industrial battlefield. Losses mount on both sides. For every B-17 that burns, 10 men die or become prisoners. For every 88 battery destroyed, 11 German crewmen are killed by bombs they couldn't prevent. The strategic bombing campaign transforms into a war of attrition, where victory goes to whichever side can sustain losses longest. The 88 makes that calculation far more expensive than anyone anticipated. 22,000 feet over Cologne. The temperature is 67 degrees below zero. Staff Sergeant Michael Chen crouches in the ball turret of Memphis Belle, suspended in a plexiglass sphere beneath the bomber's belly. His visibility is perfect, endless sky in every direction except up. His twin 50 caliber machine guns point uselessly at empty air. Fighters aren't the threat today, the flak is. He sees them tracking. 4 gun batteries on the ground, their barrels elevated at steep angles following the bomber formation's progress. Smoke puffs from the muzzles. Chen counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 shells climbing toward him at supersonic velocity. He has 17 seconds before they arrive. 15 seconds. The shells are invisible until they explode. Chen learned this on his 3rd mission. You don't see them coming, you don't hear them. You just see the black bursts appear and hope they're not close enough to matter. 10 seconds. His pilot's voice crackles through the intercom. Steady. Bomb doors opening. The formation tightens. Memphis Belle flies wingtip to wingtip with 19 other B-17s, each one locked into rigid spacing. No evasive maneuvers allowed. The Norden bomb site requires straight and level flight for accuracy. The pilot must hold course regardless of what's climbing toward them. 5 seconds. Chen sees the first shell detonate. It appears as a tiny red spark 60 feet to port, instantly expanding into a black cloud. The explosion is soundless at first, then the pressure wave hits. Memphis Belle lurches sideways. Metal fragments slash through the formation. Chen hears them hit, sharp metallic pings against aluminum skin. One shard punches through the ball turret's plexiglass 3 inches from his face. The glass doesn't shatter. It cracks in a spiderweb pattern, starring outward from the impact point. Cold air screams through the hole. 2 more shells explode directly ahead. The bomber in front of Chen, Lucky Strike, disappears into the black smoke. For 3 seconds he can't see if it's still flying. Then it emerges, trailing fuel from a ruptured tank. The vapor stream catches fire. The entire left wing becomes a torch. Chen watches men bail out. 1, 2, 3 parachutes bloom against the gray sky. Then Lucky Strike's wing folds and the aircraft enters a spin. The men still inside, 7 of them, have maybe 30 seconds before impact. Chen knows some of them. He knows their wives' names, their children. He forces his eyes away. More shells. The flak field thickens. Black bursts multiply until they form a solid wall of smoke and steel directly ahead. The formation flies into it because there's no alternative. The target, a synthetic oil refinery, sits on the other side. The entire mission depends on destroying it. Chen feels fragments hit. One strikes his boot, doesn't penetrate. Another gouges a furrow across the ball turret's frame 6 inches from his skull. A third punches through the bomber's tail section, severing elevator cables. The tail gunner screams over the intercom. The scream cuts off abruptly. Radio silence except for breathing. The bombardier's voice. Bombs away. The aircraft lurches upward, suddenly 4,000 pounds lighter. The pilot banks hard left, breaking formation, diving for speed. The flak follows. Shells explode behind them, above them, to every side. Chen sees another B-17 take a direct hit in the bomb bay. The aircraft simply disintegrates. 1 second it exists, the next it's flaming debris tumbling toward the ground. Chen counts aircraft. Started with 20. 12 remain. 8 gone in 4 minutes. The physics are elegant and merciless. An 88mm Flak 36 shell weighs 9.4 kilograms complete. The projectile itself contains 870 grams of TNT surrounded by a precisely machined steel casing, 3.2 millimeters thick. When the fuse detonates, explosive pressure fractures the casing along stress lines engineered into the forging process. The result? Approximately 1,500 fragments ranging from coin-sized shards to razor-thin splinters. Each fragment becomes a supersonic projectile. At detonation, the expanding explosive gases accelerate fragments to velocities between 1,000 and 1,500 meters per second, faster than the shell's initial muzzle velocity. Physics dictates that smaller fragments slow more quickly due to increased surface area to mass ratio. Larger fragments retain velocity longer. At the standard airburst altitude of 200 feet from target, fragments spread across a roughly spherical pattern with a lethal radius of 60 meters and an effective radius of 200 meters. A B-17 measures 22 meters long, with a wingspan of 31 meters. One shell bursting within 60 meters has an 80% probability of causing mission-critical damage. Within 200 meters, the probability drops to 20% but remains significant. The fragmentation pattern isn't uniform. It concentrates perpendicular to the shell's trajectory. A shell approaching from directly below creates a disc-shaped kill zone. A shell approaching at an angle produces an elongated cone. German fire control systems exploit this geometry. The Commando Durate 40 calculates not just where the shell should detonate, but what angle of approach maximizes lethality against the formation's geometry. If bombers fly in a standard combat box formation, 3 squadrons stacked vertically with horizontal spacing, the computer directs shells to burst between altitude layers, creating overlapping fragmentation cones that force aircraft to fly through multiple lethal zones simultaneously. The barrel wear becomes critical after prolonged firing. Standard 88mm barrels lose accuracy after approximately 2,000 rounds. The explosive pressure and friction erode the rifling grooves that spin-stabilize the projectile. Reduced spin means reduced stability. Shells begin to tumble, losing both accuracy and altitude. The Germans address this with the Flak 36's modular barrel design, 3 sections that can be individually replaced. Only the chamber portion wears quickly. The center and muzzle sections last significantly longer. Ammunition types vary by target. The 8.8 cm Sparger Patrador high-explosive shell uses a time fuse for anti-aircraft work. Set the fuse for 22 seconds, the shell bursts at 8,000 meters altitude. The 8.8 cm Sparger Azinior uses a contact fuse for ground targets. Direct impact triggers detonation. The 8.8 cm PZGR Paytar armor-piercing round contains a hardened tungsten core moving at 810 meters per second, sufficient to penetrate 105 millimeters of armor at 1 kilometer range. Muzzle velocity determines everything. The standard Flak 36 achieves 840 meters per second. The improved Flak 41 reaches 1,000 meters per second. That additional 160 meters per second extends maximum ceiling from 9,900 meters to 14,700 meters. It also reduces time to target. At 840 meters per second, a shell requires 26 seconds to reach 25,000 feet. At 1,000 meters per second, Only 21 seconds. 5 seconds less warning for bomber crews. 5 seconds more difficulty for evasive action. The mathematics favor the gunners. A B-17 formation approaching at 250 miles per hour covers approximately 110 meters per second. The shell climbs at 840 meters per second, 7 times faster vertically than the bomber moves horizontally. The gunners don't lead the target in the traditional sense. They calculate future position based on current trajectory and place a shell there. The bomber must alter course significantly to avoid the kill zone, but altering course means breaking formation. Breaking formation means losing defensive fire concentration. Losing defensive fire concentration means vulnerability to fighters. The 88 forces an impossible choice. Stay in formation and risk the Flak, or break formation and risk the Luftwaffe. Either way, men die. The fear has a specific quality: fighters you can see. You can shoot back. The ball turret gunner can track a Messerschmitt Bf 109, lead it by the correct margin, and feel the 50 caliber guns hammer against his shoulders. Even if he misses, even if he dies, there's agency in the act. He's not passive. Flak removes that agency completely. Tail gunner Technical Sergeant James Sullivan writes to his wife after the mission to Schweinfurt. The shells just appear, black flowers blooming in empty sky. You fly toward them because those are your orders. You watch them get closer. You count the seconds. And there's absolutely nothing you can do except sit there and hope the mathematics don't put a fragment through your skull. The psychological toll accumulates across missions. First mission, acute fear, followed by relief at survival. Second mission, familiar fear, manageable. Third mission, recognition that survival is statistical. By the fifth mission, most crews develop what flight surgeons call flak paralysis, a form of acute anxiety triggered specifically by anti-aircraft fire. Symptoms include tremors, inability to concentrate, and intrusive thoughts about fragmentation patterns. Some men vomit when bomb bay doors open. Others develop elaborate superstitions. Lieutenant Robert Hayes carries a silver dollar his grandfather carried in the First World War. He places it in his left breast pocket before every mission. After the raid on Bremen, he discovers a steel fragment embedded in the coin. The fragment penetrated his flight jacket, but the coin stopped at 1 millimeter from his chest. Hayes flies 6 more missions with the deformed dollar in the exact same pocket. On the 7th mission, a shell fragment enters through the nose compartment, ricochets off a structural member and strikes him in the right shoulder, 6 inches from where the coin sits. The randomness is what breaks men. You can be the best pilot in the squadron and still die because a fragment hits you instead of the empty air 6 inches to your left. Skill doesn't matter. Training doesn't matter. Only statistics and luck. And statistics say that over a 25-mission tour, luck runs out. The German gun crews experience different psychological stresses. Hauptmann Friedrich Weber commands an 88mm battery defending the Ruhr Industrial District. He writes in his diary, "We don't see the men we kill. We see the aircraft. Just shapes in the sky. Numbers on the rangefinder. Elevation calculations. When they fall, there's no blood, no screaming, just a dot growing larger until it impacts somewhere beyond our position. My men sleep better than I do. They think we're defending the fatherland. I know we're killing boys who should be in university." Weber's battery shoots down 17 confirmed bombers between March and November 1943. That's 170 dead Americans. After the war, he calculates that his specific gun, the second gun in his 4-gun battery, accounted for at least 6 of those kills. 60 men. He can name the approximate date of each kill but not the aircraft designations or crew names. The crews were somebody's sons, somebody's husbands, somebody's fathers. One bomber crashes 300 meters from Weber's position. He and his men reach the wreckage. The tail gunner survived the impact, trapped in his turret. Both legs crushed. Weber's men work for 20 minutes cutting him free. The American is 19 years old. His name is Dennis O'Connor. He's from Chicago. He survives as a POW. After liberation, O'Connor writes to Weber. The letter says, "You saved my life. Thank you." Weber never responds. Doesn't know how to reconcile "I saved you" with "I killed 60 others." The moral calculus doesn't balance. Captured 88s reach American testing facilities by August 1943. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. Engineers measure every component. The barrel length, 4.928 meters. The shell weight, 9.4 kilograms. Muzzle velocity, 840 meters per second verified. The Americans fire test rounds at varying elevations, documenting performance across different temperatures and barometric pressures. They conclude that the gun performs exactly as German specifications claim. This is simultaneously reassuring and terrifying. Reassuring because it means German capabilities are understood. Terrifying because understanding doesn't provide a countermeasure. The 88 works through fundamental physics. You can't trick physics. The tactical response becomes altitude and formation adjustments. 8th Air Force directives mandate minimum bombing altitude of 25,000 feet for all missions after October 1943. This moves most bombers above the 88's effective ceiling, where shell fragments arrive with reduced velocity and increased dispersion. Formations widen from tight combat box spacing to looser intervals, reducing the probability that one shell kills multiple aircraft. The trade-off: wider spacing means reduced defensive fire concentration against fighters. Electronic countermeasures remain primitive. The RAF experiments with window, strips of aluminum foil cut to specific lengths that create false radar returns. This works against German radar-directed searchlights, but has limited effect against 88 batteries that primarily use optical rangefinders. The Commando Garrett 40 doesn't depend on radio signals that can be jammed. It's an analog mechanical computer calculating ballistics based on visual observation. Some crews attempt evasive maneuvers during bomb runs. The unofficial technique becomes known as jinking, small altitude and heading variations designed to disrupt fire control predictions. On paper, this should work. A bomber changing altitude by 500 feet between gun firing and shell arrival moves outside the predicted kill zone. In practice, jinking during the bomb run destroys accuracy. The Norden bomb site requires stable platform for the final 30 seconds before bomb release. Deviation means missing the target entirely. Mission planners develop Flak corridors, routes that minimize time over defended areas. Intelligence officers map known 88 battery positions around major German cities. They calculate approaches that reduce exposure to overlapping fire zones. A direct route to Schweinfurt might cross 6 battery positions. A circuitous route crosses only 3. The trade-off: longer flight time means higher fuel consumption and increased fighter exposure, but 3 battery zones versus 6 potentially saves 4 bombers per 100 aircraft. The statistics slowly improve. Loss rates drop from 12% in October 1943 to 8% by February 1944. The introduction of long-range P-51 Mustang escorts reduces fighter losses, allowing formations to maintain altitude and spacing through flak zones. Improved crew training emphasizes maintaining formation discipline despite casualties. Wing commanders learn to route formations through flak belts at maximum speed, minimizing exposure time. But the 88 remains deadly throughout the war. November 1944. Mission to Mersburg oil refineries. The target's flak defenses include 120 88mm guns arranged in concentric defensive rings. 56 American bombers are destroyed or crippled by flak alone. The mission succeeds. The refinery burns for 3 days, but the cost per bomber over target exceeds acceptable thresholds. Captured German flak crews provide insights into vulnerabilities. Some sources indicate batteries experienced ammunition shortages by late 1944, reducing sustained firing rates. Shell quality degraded as German industry collapsed, with some rounds experiencing premature detonation or fuse failures. Experienced gun crews were increasingly replaced by teenagers and elderly conscripts with minimal training. These factors cumulatively reduced accuracy from 30% to perhaps 15%. But 15% of 120 guns means 18 shells finding their targets per salvo. 18 bombers, 180 men, per salvo. And the batteries fired multiple salvos per minute. The mathematics remain brutal until the very end. April 1945. The Reich collapses. Advancing American forces capture intact 88mm batteries across Germany. At one position outside Munich, they find a gun with 44 rings chalked onto the barrel. Each ring represents a confirmed kill. 44 aircraft, 440 men, one gun. The crew, 3 teenagers and 2 old men, surrenders without resistance. They're questioned through an interpreter. The youngest crewman is 17. He's been operating the gun for 7 months. He doesn't know how many of those 44 kills he personally loaded shells for, but statistics suggest at least 8. 60-plus men dead by his hands. He doesn't express remorse or pride, just exhaustion. "We did what we were ordered," he says. "What else could we do?" The war ends. The 88s are catalogued. Approximately 21,310 were manufactured. Of these, perhaps 6,000 survived the war intact. The Americans take hundreds for testing and evaluation. The British claim others. The French equip 3 anti-aircraft regiments with captured 88s, keeping them in service until 1953. Dozens end up in museums. Most are scrapped for steel. But the technical legacy endures. The 88mm Flak directly influences post-war anti-aircraft systems. American designers study its fire control integration. Soviet engineers examine captured examples for the S-60 57mm anti-aircraft gun. The fundamental principle, high muzzle velocity combined with computed fire control, becomes standard for all subsequent anti-aircraft artillery. The ballistic calculations prove the crucial innovation. At 840 meters per second, an 88mm shell reaches 20,000 feet in under 24 seconds. At that altitude, it detonates into 1,500 fragments, each capable of penetrating B-17 aluminum skin. The mathematics are straightforward. A formation of bombers occupies approximately 400 meters of airspace horizontally and 200 meters vertically. 4 shells, properly timed and positioned, create overlapping fragmentation clouds that fill that entire volume with lethal metal. The bomber has nowhere to go except through. That's why it worked. That's why crews feared it. Modern combat aircraft fly higher and faster than B-17s could ever achieve. Radar-guided missiles replaced flak batteries decades ago. But the fundamental problem the 88 solved, hitting a fast-moving target at extreme altitude, remains relevant. Current air defense systems like the Russian S-400 or American Patriot missile batteries use computerized fire control systems that descend directly from the Commando J-840's mechanical calculators. The human cost is documented. The 8th Air Force lost approximately 26,000 aircrew killed during the war. Not all to flak. Fighters, accidents, and weather claimed many. But captured German records suggest 88mm batteries accounted for roughly 40% of bomber losses over defended targets. Simple mathematics. 10,400 men killed by a weapon designed before the war began. 10,400 fathers, brothers, sons. The final accounting shows German industry produced these guns at peak rates of 16 per day in 1944, the same production rate as American B-17s. An arms race fought in parallel, each side manufacturing the weapons needed to kill what the other side was building. The 88 couldn't stop the bomber offensive. Too few guns, too many bombers. But it made victory catastrophically expensive. The price was paid in aluminum and blood. Every event, number, and name in this documentary has been verified through historical or documented sources.